thank you. Now, since we're in Downing Street, or close to Downing Street, I thought it's appropriate to talk about the big question everyone asks, which is, why are they doing this? Why do they allow this? And I think the answer is because they want to. It's in their interest, it serves, it suits. Okay, you hear me okay? It serves, it suits their interest to do so. It gives people a little bit ground down, makes them a bit more manageable, a bit more docile, a bit easier to move. Now, these problems are getting out of hand. The problems with Islam that I've talked about, they are not some unfortunate byproduct of an otherwise benevolent policy. They are the policy, and they're getting out of hand. First of all, three things: the rape gangs, the anti-Semitism, the Jew hating, and thirdly, the seditious mosques. First of all, the rape gangs. We wrote, you may have read, the definitive report on this. It's called Easy Meat, and it deals with the background, the history, the methods, and the cover-ups and denials with those gangs. And we were called hate mongers for estimating that there could be 10,000 girls victimised by these gangs. And it appears that we underestimated that number. We underestimated the number of victims by a factor of about 100. So the latest estimate by one MP is 1 million girls victimised by these gangs. And that's an appalling number. 1 million flattered, seduced, raped, exploited, and then enslaved and destroyed. Now, as genocide is to murder, that crime is to rape. It seems to me it's that serious. And it has everything to do with Islamic doctrine. Islamic doctrine is very clear about calling for the enslavement of unbelievers. And sexual enslavement is something to be used within warfare against unbelievers. The Quran itself, the Quran alone, mentions 14 times, 14 times, those whom your right hand possess. That is principally people who are taken as slaves, sexual slaves in war. Now, the only reliable figures we have on this, because no reliable figures have been gathered, the only reliable figures we have are the court cases, the court convictions, and what they reveal is that for this crime, that's the localised on-street rape gang crime, Muslims are approximately between 100 and 200 times likelier to commit this crime than a non-Muslim. It is as serious as that. It's not really about, you can't really call this crime. It's not about sex either. No normal man gets pleasure raping a child with a bottle or a baseball bat and nailing her tongue to the table. That isn't really common garden crime. That's more about rape as conflict, rape as subjugation. And it needs to be stamped out immediately. It's not a crime that you learn lessons from. It's not a crime that you set up a commission of inquiry about. It's a crime that you stamp out yesterday with any legal means to hand. And if you don't have those legal means, then you make sure you get them pretty fast. The politicians instead, as we've seen, tend to cover it up, tend to deny it. In particular, what they deny is who is doing it and why. It's an embarrassing price for them to pay, but it is an acceptable price to pay. Because the problems with Islam are not an unfortunate byproduct of an otherwise benevolent policy. The problems with Islam are the policy. Secondly, the second problem, that's the Jew hating that we see. We're seeing an outbreak of that across the whole of Europe. Now, the Quran is much more anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish than was Hitler's Mein Kampf. It mentions hatred of Jews many more times. And we also see the common denominator for jihad in the West at the moment is go and kill a cartoonist, go and kill a filmmaker, go and kill a free speech activist, and then always go and kill some Jews. Find a synagogue, find a Jewish-owned supermarket, find a Jewish-owned hostel, and kill yourself some Jews. And the politicians respond to this by saying, well, it's an extension of the Middle East conflict. That is nonsense. That's like the two Enlightenment philosophers who went out one evening, they got drunk on brandy and water that evening. The next evening they got drunk on whiskey and water, and on the third evening they got drunk on gin and water. So on the fourth evening they decided, well, it's obviously water that makes you drunk. Now that's the way the politicians are dealing with this problem. And we saw it after the killings in Denmark and the killings in Paris. Politicians getting up and saying, we have to stop anti-Semitism, we have to stop it. But one thing they won't do is to stop alternatives, because as any teacher, any parent, any psychologist knows, if you are to deal with bullying, you have to identify that bullying, pin that bullying, you have to identify them closely. And that's one thing politicians will never do. It is wrong because people suffer. Jews across Europe are realising that maybe they don't have a future here, maybe they should go. It's wrong, secondly, because it persecutes the eternal victim. And we see that again. Jews are afraid to report this crime for fear of making it worse. And that's how it happens. One group find they can get away with it, so Muslims see that they can get away with it, they don't get directly confronted, other groups will join in. We see that in Europe, we see that in France, and that is wrong. Thirdly, it's wrong because it is wrong to persecute or to harm people who bring benefit. And Jewish people bring benefit. I'm not Jewish, so I can say this. Jewish people are a light among the nations. If you find that offensive, it's not me that you find offensive, it is the Nobel lists that you find offensive. It's the rolls of charitable giving that you find offensive. It's the prison census that you find offensive because it has so few Jewish names on it. And a nation, you have to be careful about this, because a country, a nation that loses its Jewish population is a nation that is ground down. It's a nation that's heading for trouble. And that again, that is an embarrassing price for politicians to pay, but it is an acceptable price to pay. Because the problems with Islam are not a byproduct of the policy, they are the policy. Now, the third thing is the problem of seditious mosques. And we, as you know, I have some interest in this, I have some credibility to talk about that. Thank you. We set ourselves 3 objectives as regards to new mosques in this country, and that is firstly to slow the tide, secondly to stop the tide, and thirdly to turn the tide. We have slowed the tide. We are starting work on stopping the tide, and if any of you wish to offer your help, it will be very welcome. Please do. Why are we doing that? Why should you do it? Why will your descendants be grateful if you do that? The reason is simple and clear, and it is that a mosque is used for the public propagation of Islamic doctrine. And the public propagation of Islamic doctrine is contrary to English law. And the reason the public propagation the reason it is contrary to English law is because Islamic doctrine calls for violence, hatred, warfare, and enslavement towards unbelievers. I think there are loads of quotes. It's on every other page. I could read 2 quotes. When you meet with the unbelievers, strike at their necks, and when you have made a bloodbath amongst them, bind them firmly. I think we can say that's encouraging war. The other one, make war against the unbelievers until they pay the infidel poll tax, that's you and me, until we pay a poll tax to the Muslims, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Verses 474 and verse 929. Now, if you allow that to get preached, if you allow that to get propagated, you are not going to have a civil society for very long. That is incompatible with civil society, and the evidence we see from around the world is that the public propagation of Islamic doctrine is probably not even compatible with Islamic society, what we see on our TV screens every night. So our society's got no chance. Now, what are we doing about it? What do? We help poor, vulnerable neighbours that are exposed to Islam. We help them to, we give them legal help to use the system to resist applications for new mosques. The law calls for that. Policy encourages it, and the system requires it. We simply help ordinary neighbours to do their duty within the system, within the law. And we're vilified for that. We're simply cleaning up the mess that politicians have made, and which they are unable to clean up. You'd think they would just let us get on with it, but no. We're vilified for that. And the reason is because this growth of Islam, the problems with Islam, suit you if you are a politician. They are not a byproduct of the policy, they are the policy. Now that's not conspiracy. This isn't about conspiracy. It's simply observing that ambitious people do what it is in their interests to do, as most of us do most of the time. It's about self-serving groupthink. It works, so it grows. And if you doubt it, if you think this is untrue, ask yourself, what is the corresponding benefit to Islam? How does anyone else benefit from it? If you doubt that, ask yourself, Why do we see record numbers of immigration every year, particularly Islamic immigration? And this at a time when politicians say they're having to fight for every vote, and that every poll that is conducted reveals there's about a 60 or 80% majority of people wanting tighter controls on immigration, particularly Islamic immigration. And when immigration is, I think, among the top 2 or 3 issues of every poll, obviously politicians don't want to fight for those votes. Again, if you doubt this, why is it that the authorities go bent when they're dealing with the problems of Islam? It's not simple incompetence, it's not simple blindness. Incompetence doesn't explain the uniformity of these policies across the whole of Europe. It can't explain that. Usually if you're incompetent, there's some variety. This is something that is actively sought out. It is not a byproduct of the policy, it is the policy. And you don't have to be a genius to work this out. Every violent boyfriend, every white painter, every neighbourhood thug, every simple dictator understands this. If you grind people down a little bit, if you make them more dependent, if you deny them their sense of identity, then they're going to be a little bit more docile, a bit more easier to rule. And you have to be one of those politicians. That is interesting. So to expect politicians to deal with these problems they won't. You have to do it yourself. They will talk all the time about public actions. Actions will be about self-interest, about self-serving. You have to do it yourself and do it within the law. Do it using the law. If you ignore the law, you are likely to find that it may not be worth winning in the end at all. If you use the law, you will find it to be a potent weapon. You will find yourself more likely to win. And that is what we do. That's what we continue to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. Whoa!